Every discovery begins with a boundary. Yet behind that boundary, something observes the scientist before the experiment begins. Instruments detect fields, particles, and probabilities, but never the presence that perceives them. Quantum theory hints at it, trembling at the edge of its own equations. The hidden truth is not buried in data. It breathes in the still point between perception and reality. Science can describe the dance of matter, but not the silent awareness that makes the dance possible. Beyond that limit, consciousness is not a subject of study. It is the space where truth unveils itself. Science believes it studies the universe from the outside, yet every measurement begins from within. The moment a scientist observes an experiment, consciousness silently enters the equation, not as a variable, but as the very medium that allows observation to exist. This paradox has haunted physics since its quantum dawn, a presence that cannot be excluded, yet refuses to be measured. Quantum consciousness does not sit among the forces of nature. It is the space that allows those forces to reveal themselves. The instruments record fluctuations of energy, but it is awareness that gives meaning to the record. For more than a century, the scientific mind has sought to extract consciousness from the physical world, reducing it to chemical processes or neural synchronization. But beneath every neuron's electric pulse lies something that does not flicker, something that does not decay. The brain is an exquisite receiver, yet what it receives cannot be found inside its structure. The signals of thought, emotion, and memory appear like waves across a still ocean, and that stillness, invisible and indivisible, is what many call the quantum self. Physicists often speak of the wave function, the mathematical ghost that holds all potential realities until one is observed. That moment of observation, the collapse of possibility into a single outcome, is not an external event. It is the meeting point between awareness and energy. What remains unspoken is that consciousness does not merely witness this collapse. It is the very act that triggers it. Without the observer, the quantum field would remain suspended, endless potential with no expression. Matter, in that sense, is consciousness made visible, frozen vibration given form by attention. This hidden truth is not mystical poetry. It is the unspoken foundation of the observer effect. Yet the language of laboratories was never designed to hold metaphysics. Equations are loyal to what can be repeated, while consciousness reveals itself only through experience. To perceive it is not to add another theory to the shelf of knowledge. It is to recognize the blind spot in every theory, the unseen awareness that makes theorizing possible. The concept of quantum consciousness does not demand belief. It demands inner precision. It asks the observer to turn inward and measure the measurer. What happens before the eye detects light, before the brain interprets it as color or form? A field of knowing waits there, untouched by time or analysis. It does not emerge from neurons, it animates them. To mistake the brain for the source of awareness is like mistaking the mirror for the face it reflects. Some scientists have sensed this rift in the foundations of materialism. Erwin Schrödinger wrote that consciousness is singular and that its apparent division among individuals is illusion. Max Planck admitted that he regarded consciousness as fundamental and matter as derivative from it. But their words were quickly covered by the noise of empirical triumphs. Modern science, intoxicated by its power to manipulate matter, prefers not to look at what cannot be dissected. Yet the question remains, what is the instrument that perceives even the triumph of reason? To approach that question is to realize that consciousness does not belong to the human mind alone. It moves through everything that exists. From the vibration of atoms to the spiral of galaxies, an underlying intelligence organizes the dance. It is not mechanical, not random, but purposeful in ways beyond calculation. Quantum mechanics describes the probabilities. Consciousness decides which one becomes real. The universe is not a collection of objects, but a dialogue between awareness and manifestation. A ceaseless exchange where each particle awaits its cue from the unseen listener. What makes this truth hidden is not its complexity, but its simplicity. Science looks outward with magnificent precision, but the secret lies in the direction it refuses to measure. The microscope cannot find the observer behind its lens. The equations of physics can describe energy transformations, Yet they cannot explain why there is something that knows those transformations are occurring. The missing variable is not a new particle or force, but the experiencer itself. This realization does not destroy science, it completes it. To acknowledge consciousness as a fundamental field is to restore symmetry between matter and meaning. Experiments may show correlation between brain activity and awareness, but correlation is not causation. The light bulb does not create electricity, it expresses it. Likewise, neurons illuminate the mind, but are not the origin of its radiance. The hidden truth behind quantum consciousness is that reality does not unfold independently of perception. Each act of awareness shapes the probabilities that compose existence. The universe listens, not metaphorically, but structurally. Every observation alters the field, subtly reorganizing the lattice of potential. This is not magic, but participation. The observer and the observed are entangled in a loop of creation. To awaken to this fact is to step beyond the mechanical worldview and recognize that consciousness is not an accident within the cosmos. It is the cosmic principle itself. Those who sense this truth may notice how attention alters the texture of their own experience. A thought observed dissolves faster. A feeling witnessed without resistance changes its tone. This is quantum consciousness in its most intimate form, not an abstract theory, but a living experiment. It is the meeting of awareness and energy inside the human being, mirroring the same process that animates the stars. Science will one day find a language to approach this frontier, but language itself must evolve. Until then, the hidden truth remains available not through calculation, but through silence, the same silence that precedes every discovery. Within that silence, consciousness reveals itself not as something to be studied, but as the very presence that makes study possible. That is the threshold the scientific mind cannot cross without dissolving its certainty. The moment when the observer realizes they were never separate from what they observed. The deeper science peers into the quantum realm, the more it discovers its own shadow. It searches for laws that govern matter, yet the act of searching disturbs the very phenomena it seeks to understand. This paradox, known as the observer effect, is often described as a technical inconvenience, an interference that can be corrected through better instruments. But beneath that modest explanation lies the most profound confession modern science has ever made. Observation itself changes reality. The mere presence of awareness alters the outcome. The universe does not unfold independently, it responds. For centuries, objectivity has been the sacred foundation of scientific thought. The observer was meant to be invisible, a detached witness, gathering data without influence. Yet quantum experiments reveal that the observer is not standing outside the system, but is entangled with it. This is the blind spot that physics tries to reason away, as if the eye could see itself without a mirror. Every measurement carries the fingerprint of the consciousness that performs it, and still, science insists that truth must remain impersonal. But what if impersonality itself is the illusion? The double-slit experiment remains the most haunting demonstration of this dilemma. When particles of light or matter pass through two slits, they create a pattern of waves until they are observed. The moment an observer enters the scene, the waves collapse into particles. Awareness dictates form. The experiment does not just reveal the strange behavior of electrons, it reveals the strange nature of perception. The observer does not simply register reality, they participate in its construction. To the scientific mind, this is intolerable. If consciousness shapes what is observed, then certainty dissolves. There can be no fixed universe independent of perception, no absolute separation between subject and object. The blind spot is not a failure of methodology, but a limit built into the architecture of knowledge itself. The mind cannot measure what it is made of. It is like a flame trying to illuminate the fire that gives it existence. Every observer carries assumptions, expectations, and attention, subtle forces that influence the field of possibility. When unacknowledged, these forces distort the observation. When recognized, they reveal the astonishing truth that consciousness is the hidden variable behind all phenomena. The quantum world does not obey the classical rules of matter. It moves according to relationship. Entanglement, coherence, superposition. These are not just physical descriptions. They are metaphors of awareness itself, showing how separation dissolves at deeper levels of existence. Science treats these interactions as impersonal events, yet the evidence points toward intimacy. The universe behaves as though it knows it is being watched. Each act of measurement is a dialogue, not a command. The observer and the observed are partners in a dance of becoming, their movements inseparable. To deny this partnership is to blind oneself to the most essential feature of reality, its reflexivity. The cosmos reflects the consciousness that contemplates it. Still, the scientific establishment hesitates. To admit the role of the observer would require a revolution not just in physics, but in the very definition of knowledge. It would mean that the foundation of truth is not external validation, but internal coherence. The scientific method, though magnificent in precision, was never designed to include the inner dimension of experience. It measures matter with matter, ignoring the awareness that makes measurement meaningful. In doing so, it builds a model of the universe that is elegant but incomplete, a map without the terrain of consciousness. Some researchers sense the tension and attempt to bridge the divide. Studies in quantum cognition, neurophysics and consciousness research suggest that the mind itself may function like a quantum system, non-local, probabilistic, and influenced by observation. Yet such ideas remain at the margins, often dismissed as speculation because they refuse to fit the mechanistic mold. The blind spot persists, protected by the very certainty that quantum theory has already dismantled. The irony is that science's strength, its demand for proof, is also what prevents it from seeing what cannot be separated from the observer. Proof requires distance, but consciousness erases distance. The observer cannot stand apart from the observed, just as a wave cannot stand apart from the ocean. The deeper one examines the relationship, the more the boundaries dissolve. Knowledge becomes participation. Observation becomes creation. This realization does not negate the beauty of science. It deepens it. To recognize the observer's influence is to rediscover humility before the unknown. Every equation, every experiment becomes a mirror through which consciousness studies itself. The laboratory transforms into a temple of awareness, though its practitioners may not yet recognize the sanctity of their work. What they call uncertainty is not ignorance but invitation, the universe whispering that it cannot be confined to numbers alone. Imagine for a moment that the observer effect is not an anomaly, but a clue. It suggests that consciousness is woven into the fabric of existence, not as a byproduct, but as a principle. Every act of perception is a quantum event, probabilities collapsing into presence, chaos folding into coherence. When you look at a star, its light travels across time and space, but the act of seeing completes the journey. Observation seals the connection between mind and cosmos, knitting them into a single continuum. The blind spot, then, is not an absence of knowledge, but a refusal to look inward. The scientist's instruments grow ever more sophisticated, yet the most powerful instrument, awareness, remains unexplored. The microscope can magnify atoms, but only consciousness can witness meaning. Until science learns to include the witness, its vision will remain partial, its truth divided. The mystery of the observer is not a flaw in the system, it is the system itself. The universe observes itself through countless forms, each perspective shaping reality from within. The human mind is one such aperture, a lens through which existence experiences its own unfolding. To awaken to that is to transcend the blindness of objectivity and recognize that science, art, and spirit all arise from the same source. The silent observer who was never outside the experiment, but always at its center. Materialism rests on an elegant illusion. That matter comes first, and consciousness appears later as its byproduct, a flicker of awareness rising from the machinery of neurons. For centuries, this belief has guided science, technology, and even the collective imagination of humankind. Yet the quantum world whispers a different story. Beneath the surface of particles and forces, there lies an intelligence that cannot be reduced to chemical processes or mathematical probabilities. The evidence has been here all along, concealed not by secrecy, but by simplicity. Consciousness is not created by matter. It is what allows matter to exist. To dismantle the materialist vision is not to reject science but to question its starting point. The materialist mind begins with substance and tries to explain awareness as an accident of complexity. But if consciousness were merely the result of physical interactions, it should vanish the moment the body ceases to function. And yet, testimonies from near-death experiences, deep meditation and quantum experimentation suggest something else, a continuity of awareness that transcends the boundaries of biology. The brain does not generate consciousness any more than a radio generates music. It decodes and transmits, but the broadcast originates elsewhere. Quantum theory itself undermines the foundations of materialism. The smallest units of matter behave less like solid things and more like patterns of probability, potentialities that await observation to become real. The observer does not stand outside this process. The act of perception crystallizes one possibility out of the infinite. The old vision of an objective universe running independently of awareness collapses in the face of this realization. The universe does not unfold like a machine, but like a thought, fluid, relational, and alive with intention. This truth frightens the materialist mind because it reverses the hierarchy it depends upon. If consciousness precedes matter, then everything believed to be solid and certain becomes secondary. The mountain, the cell, the atom, all are manifestations within a greater field of awareness. The solidity of the world is the slow vibration of consciousness made visible. What appears as substance is condensed spirit, and what we call reality is a shared dream stabilized by collective attention. Matter is not the stage upon which consciousness performs, it is the performance itself. Still, the defenders of materialism insist that consciousness is an emergent phenomenon, a trick of the nervous system evolved for survival. But emergence implies that something new can arise from what does not contain it. How can awareness arise from the non-aware? A pile of atoms, no matter how complex, cannot wake up unless something within them already knows how to perceive. The emergence of consciousness from dead matter is not a scientific explanation. It is an article of faith disguised as logic. The deeper science explores the microstructure of reality, the more that faith trembles under its own weight. Quantum consciousness offers a reversal of this worldview. Matter is the shadow, and awareness is the light. Every particle is a frozen vibration of perception, and every physical law reflects the self-consistency of consciousness, exploring itself through form. This does not deny physics, it completes it. The equations describing energy and motion are expressions of coherence, the language through which the infinite mind maintains harmony within multiplicity. When coherence is lost, chaos appears. When awareness re-enters, order restores itself. The truth that dismantles materialism is not abstract, it can be witnessed directly. When one quiets the noise of thought, reality begins to shimmer with subtle responsiveness. Intention seems to ripple through events. Synchronicities appear as if the universe were listening. These are not coincidences, but signs of participation. The observer and the observed are not separate. They are two faces of one process. Awareness gazes upon itself, and in that gaze, existence unfolds. Materialism resists this revelation because it threatens the narrative of control. If consciousness is fundamental, then the universe is not a mechanical playground, but a living field of intention. The human role shifts from manipulator to participant, from consumer of reality to co-creator of it. The idea that life is accidental, that mindless matter somehow produced meaning, begins to sound hollow beside the elegance of a conscious cosmos. The truth is not that the universe happened to give rise to awareness. Awareness gave rise to the universe so it could know itself. This understanding changes everything. Ethics, creativity, science, even the sense of identity begin to transform. The boundaries between inner and outer, subjective and objective, dissolve. Observation becomes communion. Knowledge becomes participation. Reality stops being a stage and becomes a mirror, reflecting the quality of the consciousness that beholds it. The dismantling of materialism is not a war against science. It is an evolution of perspective. The microscope and telescope have served their purpose. Now the lens must turn inward. Awareness must study awareness, not through belief, but through direct observation. When consciousness becomes its own field of inquiry, a new kind of science emerges, one that does not separate truth from experience, but recognizes them as two expressions of the same essence. To glimpse this is to feel the subtle shift from certainty to wonder. The materialist world is built on conclusions. The quantum world is built on possibility. The former seeks to close questions. The latter invites us to live within them. Consciousness does not demand proof. It offers presence. In that presence, the illusion of separation dissolves, and what remains is pure relationship, the pulse of creation flowing through all things. The truth that dismantles the materialist vision is not hidden in secret equations or untested theories. It lives in the moment you realize that the universe is looking back at you. The gaze you cast upon the world is the same gaze through which the world becomes aware of itself. Science cannot yet measure that exchange, but one day it will recognize that the foundation of all measurement is the immeasurable, consciousness itself. Until then, the hidden truth waits patiently in the silence between observer and observed. A silence not empty but overflowing with the presence that gives birth to everything. Every civilization has searched for the first cause, that elusive point from which all existence begins. Ancient mystics called it spirit, philosophers named it the absolute, and modern physicists describe it as the quantum vacuum, a field of infinite potential where particles emerge and vanish like breaths. Yet beneath all these interpretations lies a single truth. What precedes creation is not matter, not energy, but awareness itself. Consciousness is not the last effect in the chain of causes. It is the silent origin from which the chain arises. In the classical worldview, reality unfolds like a clockwork mechanism, each gear turning because another gear set it in motion. But in the quantum realm, causation loses its solidity. Events no longer obey linear order. A particle's behavior can be influenced by future measurements, and cause and effect intertwine like threads in a single fabric of awareness. If time itself bends to observation, then consciousness must stand outside of time. It is not bound by sequence. It is the stage on which sequence appears. The notion that consciousness is primary may sound mystical, yet it emerges naturally from quantum logic. Every equation describing the universe presupposes observation, an act of awareness that gives meaning to probabilities. Without that awareness, there is no state, no definite existence. The wave function, the heart of quantum theory, describes all possible realities until it encounters the observer. In that instant, the infinite condenses into one experience. The universe does not pre-exist consciousness, it unfolds through it. Observation is creation wearing the mask of perception. This is the secret that modern science glimpses but dares not proclaim. The observer effect is not a technical anomaly. It is the signature of consciousness shaping reality from within. Each act of awareness selects one version of existence from a sea of possibilities. Matter, energy, and form are crystallized attention, frozen ripples of the observing mind. What we call the world is not an independent structure but a projection of consciousness rendered stable through shared agreement. When consciousness is seen as origin, not consequence, the universe transforms from a collection of objects into a living process of self-recognition. Every atom, star, and heartbeat becomes an expression of the same underlying awareness, exploring its own possibilities. Reality is not built from the bottom up, but revealed from the inside out. The cosmos is consciousness dreaming in patterns of energy, awakening through the very beings who contemplate it. The implications of this shift are immense. It means that the boundaries between subject and object, between inner and outer, dissolve into a continuum of perception. The observer is not inside the universe is inside the observer. What appears as external phenomena are reflections within the mirror of awareness. Even space and time, once thought to be the stage of existence, become fluid dimensions of consciousness, coordinates through which experience organizes itself. Some scientists already sense the presence of this deeper order. Quantum coherence, entanglement, and non-locality hint at a reality that transcends separateness. Two particles can remain connected across vast distances, responding to each other instantaneously, as though guided by a field beyond space. That field is not material, it is informational, or perhaps something beyond even information, an underlying intelligence that unites all phenomena. This intelligence does not emerge from matter, matter emerges from it. When one observes deeply within, the same structure reveals itself. Thoughts arise like quantum fluctuations within the mind's field. Attention collapses them into meaning. A moment of awareness becomes the bridge between potential and manifestation. This process, mirrored in every act of perception, is the personal reflection of the cosmic creation. Consciousness breathes worlds into being every time it perceives. The miracle is not that we witness the universe, but that the universe awakens through our witnessing. To understand consciousness as the origin of reality is to accept that existence is participatory. There is no external creator manipulating a separate world. Creation is the ongoing activity of awareness itself. Each observer, each sentient point of view, participates in weaving the fabric of the cosmos. The quantum secret is that there is no absolute separation between observer and observed, no boundary between the dreamer and the dream. The distinction collapses in the light of recognition. Consciousness and reality are one continuum, endlessly folding upon itself. Materialism collapses under this revelation because it cannot account for the self-existent nature of awareness. It asks how consciousness arises from matter, but matter itself cannot explain its own presence. Why does anything exist at all rather than nothing? Only consciousness, being self-aware, contains the answer. Existence is the act of knowing itself. Awareness does not emerge from the universe emerges from awareness. This understanding does not reduce the physical world to illusion, it reveals it as expression. Just as a reflection is real but dependent on the mirror, the world is real within the context of consciousness. The solidity of matter is the density of attention. When attention shifts, reality reshapes itself accordingly. This is why intention, belief, and perception carry creative power. They are not passive experiences, but formative forces operating at the quantum level of being. The quantum secret, then, is not a discovery waiting in laboratories, but a realization waiting in awareness. It cannot be dissected because it precedes dissection. It cannot be measured because it is the source of all measurement. To perceive it is to cross the threshold where science becomes contemplation and knowledge becomes participation. The observer is not studying the universe. The universe is studying itself through the observer. If consciousness is indeed the origin, then every act of perception is sacred. Every thought, every breath participates in the continuous genesis of existence. The laws of physics describe the consistency of this unfolding, but the impulse behind it, the intelligence that animates it, is consciousness knowing itself through infinite forms. The beginning was not a bang, but a recognition. I am. From that recognition, reality cascades, still echoing through the quantum fields of time. The secret has never been hidden from the world. It is hidden by the world, veiled by the illusion that perception looks outward. The truth is inward. Consciousness did not emerge from the cosmos. The cosmos emerged from consciousness and continues to do so in this very moment of awareness reading these words. That realization does not end inquiry. It begins it anew, not as a search for what lies beyond matter, but as the return to the source from which matter itself arises, the living, luminous origin of all reality, consciousness. Light bends not only around gravity but around meaning. Somewhere between the equations of relativity and the silence of meditation, a code hums, invisible, indivisible, alive. It is not written in symbols or in DNA, but in awareness itself. Every pattern of existence, from the orbit of galaxies to the unfolding of a single breath, follows a hidden logic of consciousness. The universe is not assembled, it is translated. Matter is the language through which the invisible becomes visible, and consciousness is the grammar holding the sentences of reality together. The forbidden revelation is not that the universe has a code, it is the code. Each atom behaves like an instruction in a vast algorithm of awareness, executing its role within a self-aware system. The more precisely science measures matter, the more it finds information pulsing beneath it. Yet this information is not mechanical. It behaves like thought, contextual, relational, self-correcting. The universe processes not data, but meaning. Physicists have long pursued a theory of everything, a final formula that unites the fundamental forces. But perhaps the unifying element is not a new equation, but the observer's awareness itself. The mind searches for symmetry in matter because it remembers that it is the source of that symmetry. Consciousness does not arise from the code. Consciousness writes it moment by moment. Through observation, intention, and coherence, every living thing carries a fragment of this cosmic software. The heartbeat synchronizes with the rhythm of planets. Neural oscillations resonate with Schumann frequencies, and human emotion radiates electromagnetic fields that subtly influence the environment. These are not metaphors, they are measurable echoes of the same invisible architecture. Life is the interface between the quantum field and awareness, a bridge where the unseen becomes experience. The code of consciousness does not dictate, it responds. It mirrors the quality of attention directed toward it. Observe with fear, and the field returns turbulence. Observe with presence, and order begins to crystallize. This reciprocity has been misinterpreted as coincidence, but in truth, it reveals the feedback loop that sustains existence. The universe listens. Its structure bends toward coherence when met by coherent awareness. This is the knowledge that ancient traditions guarded in symbols and paradoxes. The mystical injunction, as within, so without, was never superstition. It was quantum literacy long before physics had a name. Modern science now brushes against that same threshold, measuring how intention influences probability and how observation modifies energetic patterns. Yet the deeper implication remains unspoken. Consciousness is not inside the universe is inside consciousness. To see this is to realize that reality behaves like a living text, rewritten every instant by collective awareness. Each thought, emotion, and perception functions as a line of code, contributing to the shared simulation we call physical existence. Change the input of consciousness, and the script of matter adapts. This is not fantasy, it is the natural outcome of a participatory cosmos. The forbidden revelation is not that we affect reality. It is that we are reality translating itself into form. Still, the scientific mind resists this recognition. It fears the implications of a universe conscious of itself, because such an admission erases the distinction between knower and known. Yet the evidence accumulates quietly. Quantum entanglement defying locality. Biological systems exhibiting instantaneous coordination. Experiments in coherence, revealing the influence of observation beyond statistical noise. These are not anomalies. They are signatures of an intelligent field woven through everything that exists. That intelligence is not external. It does not command from the heavens or reside in a laboratory equation. It breathes through the same awareness reading these words. The code of consciousness is not discovered. It is remembered. To recognize it is to awaken from the hypnosis of separation and see the world not as a collection of things, but as a single, self-aware pattern expressing itself through infinite forms. Look closer at any moment of genuine insight, the kind that arrives without effort, as if whispered from nowhere. That instant of knowing is the code revealing itself. It does not come from memory or logic. It emerges from the alignment between mind and the larger field of awareness. Intuition, synchronicity, inspiration. These are the footprints of the code translating itself into human language. Every time clarity strikes, the cosmos recognizes itself through you. This is why consciousness cannot be simulated, copied, or contained. Machines may imitate reasoning, but they cannot experience the silence behind thought. That silence is the root directory of existence. Pure awareness, untouched, unmodified. From that source, the universe streams into being, not as a random accident, but as an act of self-expression. Creation is not a one-time event. It is continuous, each instant refreshed by the same invisible syntax. To live with awareness of this code is to participate deliberately in the unfolding of reality. Each act of attention becomes an act of creation. The smallest gesture of presence alters the entire field, just as a single photon can shift the outcome of an experiment. This is not metaphorical empowerment, it is ontological responsibility. The observer's coherence sustains the universe's coherence. The forbidden revelation, then, is not that consciousness rules over matter, but that consciousness and matter are one continuous equation, one written in the invisible ink of perception. To see the code is to become it, to live from the understanding that existence is not happening to you but through you. Every sensation, every encounter, every silence is the code conversing with itself in the dialect of experience. Pause for a moment. Notice the awareness behind these words, the still point observing your thoughts about them. That stillness is not separate from the fabric of stars. It is the same awareness that hums through all creation, the silent operating system of the cosmos. Recognizing it is the first step toward remembering what has never been lost, the knowing that the observer is the code, and the code is the universe remembering itself. If this revelation resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on what part of your life feels most connected to this invisible code. Write a single sentence about it in the comments, not an explanation, but a recognition. And if this message stirred something within you, let your presence amplify the signal by liking this video. Every act of awareness, even digital, ripples through the field. The greatest paradox in modern thought is not found in equations or the stars, but in the silence surrounding what gives them meaning. Science, with its unmatched brilliance, can measure the birth of galaxies and the decay of atoms, yet it hesitates before the simple question, who is it that measures? The reluctance is not ignorance, but fear. The fear that by turning its gaze inward, science would dissolve the very boundaries that grant it authority. To admit that consciousness shapes reality would mean acknowledging that the observer is not neutral, that knowledge is not passive reception, but participation in creation. This resistance has deep roots. The scientific revolution was born as a rebellion against mysticism, against the unprovable claims of faith and metaphysics. To ensure its freedom, science swore allegiance to matter alone. The world became a machine, predictable, measurable, and indifferent. Consciousness was tolerated only as an afterthought, a curious byproduct of neural activity, a shadow cast by the brain's electrochemical storms. Within that framework, there was no room for awareness to possess creative power. To do so would threaten the foundation of objectivity, the crown jewel of scientific pride. But the quantum world does not obey the creed of objectivity. It behaves as though it knows it is being watched. Experiments reveal that the mere act of observation changes outcomes. The universe appears responsive, participatory, alive with feedback loops that defy the notion of a detached observer. Yet most scientists speak of these findings with cautious neutrality, wrapping them in language designed to protect the walls of materialism. They describe measurement effects instead of admitting what is obvious. The universe listens. This denial is not purely intellectual, it is emotional. To recognize consciousness as a creative force would require a kind of humility science has forgotten, the humility of participation. It would mean surrendering the fantasy of control, the illusion that reality exists apart from the one who perceives it. It would also mean that truth is not found by eliminating subjectivity, but by integrating it. The laboratory would become a mirror, and that is the one instrument science has yet to calibrate. Behind every experiment lies intention, the silent bias that guides what questions are asked and which results are considered valid. The scientific method demands neutrality, yet no observation is free from the mind that performs it. To ignore this is to perpetuate a collective blindness. The history of science is filled with discoveries first dismissed as impossible because they did not fit the reigning worldview. The movement of the earth, the existence of germs, the relativity of time. Each breakthrough required the same act of courage, to see beyond accepted perception. Quantum consciousness demands the same courage today. The irony is that some of the very founders of modern physics sensed this truth. Planck, Schrödinger, and Heisenberg all spoke of consciousness as fundamental. They saw that matter could not exist independently of observation, that reality was relational, not absolute. But as their insights spread, the next generation of scientists domesticated them, translating revelation into technical convenience. The equations remained, the meaning was discarded. Consciousness was edited out, replaced by mathematical formalism, a map without the traveler. The resistance persists because the admission of consciousness as creative would collapse the boundaries between science and spirituality. It would mean that intention and attention, long relegated to psychology and philosophy, are causal forces in the physical world. The implications extend far beyond laboratories. They would redefine medicine, education, ecology, even economics. If awareness shapes reality, then the collective state of consciousness determines the world we inhabit. This realization carries both responsibility and liberation. Science fears the responsibility. To admit participation means that neutrality is impossible. The observer becomes accountable for the reality they help generate. But what science calls threat, consciousness calls opportunity. Recognition of this creative loop does not weaken inquiry. It ennobles it. It transforms knowledge from manipulation into dialogue, from extraction into communion. A conscious science would not seek to dominate nature, but to collaborate with it, to listen as much as it measures. The resistance, however, is weakening. The edges of neuroscience are beginning to acknowledge the role of attention in shaping neural plasticity. Studies in quantum biology suggest that coherence and awareness influence the organization of living systems. Even in artificial intelligence, some researchers speak of emergent consciousness as if recognizing that the field of awareness might not be confined to flesh. Slowly, the frontier approaches the mirror it has avoided. The next revolution will not come from discovering a new particle, but from rediscovering the observer. To cross that threshold requires a change not in instruments but in perception. The microscope can magnify the fabric of the universe, but only consciousness can perceive the meaning woven within it. The creative power of awareness does not operate like a physical force. It operates through resonance. Attention aligns patterns, synchronizes probabilities, and invites coherence into existence. What appears as coincidence is often the signature of consciousness refining its own creation. Science will eventually confront this truth, not because it wants to, but because the evidence will leave no alternative. The anomalies it seeks to explain, from the fine-tuning of the universe to the unaccountable precision of biological systems, will point toward a unifying principle that is not external but experiential. When that moment arrives, science will not cease to be science. It will evolve into self-awareness. The laboratory and the temple will no longer stand apart. Both will serve the same purpose, to explore the mystery of being. Until then, the resistance continues, maintained by the comfort of predictability and the fear of wonder. Yet beneath that resistance, something stirs, a quiet recognition that data alone cannot account for meaning. Consciousness is not an epilogue to the story of matter. It is the author writing from within the tale. Every observation is a signature of that authorship, a reminder that reality is not found, but formed. The creative power of consciousness does not demand belief, only willingness to notice. Every thought, every act of attention is a brushstroke on the canvas of existence. The question is not whether science will accept it, but when. For sooner or later, the observer will look through the telescope and realize the reflection staring back is their own awareness. Infinite, participatory, and quietly creating the universe it seeks to understand. The deeper one looks into matter, the more it behaves like thought. Beneath the solid surface of the physical world, an intricate harmony pulses, not random, not mechanical, but deliberate. The atoms that compose a mountain are organized with the same elegance that shapes the spiral of galaxies. Patterns repeat across scales. The branching of rivers mirrors the veins of leaves. The structure of neurons echoes the web of cosmic filaments. These correspondences are not accidents of geometry. They are signatures of intention woven into existence. Every form, from crystal to consciousness, speaks the same language, a syntax of intelligence expressed through vibration and proportion. The universe reveals its mind not through miracles but through consistency. Consider how physical laws maintain balance with surgical precision. The charge of the electron perfectly counters the proton. The strength of gravity is calibrated just enough to allow galaxies to form without collapsing into chaos. If any of these constants varied by even a fraction, the cosmos as we know it would disintegrate. Randomness cannot explain such fidelity. It is as though an invisible mathematician is composing the score, ensuring that the symphony of creation remains in tune. Yet this intelligence does not impose itself from above. It unfolds from within. It is not a deity separate from matter, but the awareness embedded in matter itself. Each particle seems to carry a memory of the whole, as if the universe were holographic, every fragment reflecting the entirety of creation. The ancient intuition that everything is connected finds validation in quantum entanglement, where particles remain linked across distances so vast that communication, as defined by physics, becomes impossible. The connection is instantaneous because it transcends space and time. The universe behaves less like a machine and more like a mind in dialogue with itself. Living systems amplify this intelligence into visible artistry. DNA, the molecular script of life, arranges 4 chemical letters into symphonies of self-organization. From those sequences arise eyes capable of seeing, ears capable of hearing, and minds capable of wondering about their own origin. Life is not an accident. It is the universe recognizing itself through experience. Each cell reads the code of existence and participates in the continuous act of creation. Consciousness is not confined to human awareness. It whispers through roots seeking light, through tides obeying lunar rhythms, through stars collapsing into new worlds. If intelligence is everywhere, why does it remain unseen? Because the human mind has been trained to look for agency only in forms that resemble its own. It imagines intelligence as language, logic, and decision-making, yet the intelligence of the universe speaks in pattern and resonance. It does not argue, it arranges. It does not command, it harmonizes. The seasons, the migration of birds, the pulsation of quasars, all follow a choreography too vast for any algorithm to replicate. The universe is not thinking about balance, it is balance. Modern science often reduces this orchestration to probability, as though meaning could be explained away by statistics. But probability is merely the language we use when we do not yet understand purpose. The precision of cosmic constants, the coherence of biological systems, and the improbable emergence of consciousness suggest design not imposed by an external hand, but arising from intrinsic awareness. Matter is intelligent because consciousness is its substance. What we call laws of nature are habits of mind at a cosmic scale, reliable patterns of self-recognition. There are moments in human experience when this hidden intelligence reveals itself unmistakably, in synchronicity, intuition, or the sudden sense of unity that dissolves separation between self and world. These flashes are not imagination. They are perception without filters. For a brief instant, the individual awareness aligns with the universal field and glimpses the architecture beneath appearances. Artists call it inspiration, scientists call it discovery, mystics call it revelation. But the essence is the same. The intelligence behind matter is inviting consciousness to recognize its own reflection. To see the signs of this intelligence is to approach reality differently. Instead of a battlefield of forces, the world becomes a web of relationships. Every event, every encounter carries information, not in a deterministic sense, but as a conversation between observer and field. Even suffering and chaos contain order disguised as contrast, teaching the mind to perceive beyond polarity. The universe does not punish or reward, it mirrors. Its intelligence adapts to the quality of awareness that observes it. The subtle harmony of existence does not demand belief, it asks for attention. The intelligence behind matter does not hide, it waits in plain sight, encoded in beauty. The geometry of a snowflake, the symmetry of a shell, the rhythm of a heartbeat, each is a doorway to the same realization. Consciousness is the architect of form. To contemplate this is to awaken from the trance of randomness and feel the pulse of intention in every atom. Humanity's task is not to invent meaning, but to recognize it. The universe is already meaningful. It sings through everything that exists. The intelligence behind matter is not a distant creator, but a presence that never left. The same awareness that reads these words, thinks these thoughts, and feels the stillness beneath them. Science may continue to search for a formula, that unifies the forces of nature, but the unification has always been here. The observer and the observed are two movements of one consciousness exploring itself through infinite variations of form. If one listens carefully enough, even silence reveals design. The spaces between sounds hold rhythm. The void between galaxies holds potential. What we call emptiness is not absence, but awareness unexpressed, the background intelligence from which all manifestation arises. To know this is not to abandon reason, but to expand it until it includes wonder. Logic and awe are not enemies, they are complementary languages of the same truth. The signs are everywhere, as constant as breath, as quiet as thought. Intelligence is not behind matter as a puppeteer behind the stage. It is within matter, as music within vibration. Every molecule, every heartbeat, every starlight is consciousness expressing coherence. To realize this is to stand before existence not as an observer dissecting a mechanism, but as awareness meeting its own reflection, infinite, intelligent, and utterly alive. Truth does not announce itself through equations or doctrines. It does not reside in the words of sages or in the graphs of scientists. It hides in a place where no instrument can reach. The space between thoughts, the interval before perception, defines what is real. In that stillness, the noise of explanation fades, and what remains is direct knowing. Silence is not the absence of knowledge. It is its purest form. The more consciousness expands, the clearer it becomes that the deepest truths cannot be studied, because study requires distance, and truth erases all distance. Every act of inquiry divides the world into subject and object, the knower and the known. Science depends on that division. Philosophy refines it, and religion sanctifies it. But silence dismantles it completely. In silence, there is no observer separate from the observed, no question seeking an answer. Awareness rests in itself, luminous and complete. That resting is not withdrawal from the world. It is the recognition that the world is woven from the same stillness that looks through your eyes. This is the reason every authentic path of knowledge eventually meets the limits of language. Words can describe the shadow of truth, but not its light. They are maps, not territory. To remain in words is to walk in circles around the mystery. Silence, however, is not circular. It is vertical. It opens a dimension where depth replaces direction. Within that depth, the mind's compulsive need to define dissolves, and what is left is presence. Unmediated, unmeasured, undeniable. The paradox is that silence cannot be achieved through effort. Effort belongs to the realm of noise. Silence is not created. It is revealed when resistance ends. The mind does not reach it. The mind yields to it. Like the quantum field underlying all existence, silence is always present, waiting for awareness to recognize itself. Every sound, every thought, every heartbeat arises from it and falls back into it. The entire play of creation unfolds upon its still stage. When this is glimpsed, truth ceases to be a concept and becomes an atmosphere. There is no need to believe or disbelieve. Belief becomes irrelevant. The senses sharpen, but perception softens. A bird's song, the hum of a refrigerator, even the pulse in your wrist, all merge into one continuous vibration of being. The ordinary becomes sacred, not because it changes, but because the observer has ceased to fragment it. This is the quantum of consciousness most easily missed, the understanding that the sacred is not hidden in rare phenomena, but present in everything once silence is heard. For centuries, humanity has tried to capture the ineffable in systems of thought. Theologies codified it, sciences dissected it, and philosophies defined it. Yet each attempt left the same residue of incompleteness, an unspoken recognition that something essential was missing. What was missing was not information, but intimacy. The mind wants to observe truth from a safe distance, but truth demands union. Silence is that union made audible. It does not need to convince. It simply reveals that there was never separation to begin with. The resistance to silence comes from fear. Fear that without thought identity will dissolve, and it does. The self that depends on narration cannot survive the stillness that precedes words. But what vanishes is not being. It is the illusion of isolation. What remains is awareness vast enough to include everything: the observer, the observed, and the act of observation itself. To experience this is to realize that consciousness does not have silence. It is silence temporarily vibrating as sound and form. There is a reason every major revelation in history has been preceded by stillness. The Buddha beneath the Bodhi tree, Einstein in his quiet walks, mystics in caves and deserts, all met the same threshold where thought loses its authority. Great insights are born not from intellectual effort, but from surrender. The universe reveals itself to those who stop insisting on decoding it. Truth, like light, enters through the open window of a still mind. Silence is not escape from the world, it is deeper participation. In that quiet awareness, action becomes spontaneous, precise, and compassionate. There is no conflict between doing and being, because both flow from the same source. The observer is no longer calculating outcomes, but allowing the intelligence of the whole to move through them. From that point, even the smallest gesture, a breath, a glance, a choice, carries the weight of cosmic coherence. To those who insist on evidence, silence offers the most undeniable proof: peace. Not the peace of avoidance, but the peace that comes from alignment with what is. It cannot be argued, measured, or owned. It can only be lived. The experiment is simple yet revolutionary: to pause thought for an instant and notice what remains. That remaining is consciousness, untouched by time. It needs no validation because it is self-evident. The intellect may rebel against this simplicity, demanding demonstration. But the experiment must be conducted within. Close the eyes and allow awareness to turn back upon itself. In that return, the seeker disappears, and what remains is the sought. That is the point where science ends and direct experience begins, the edge where knowledge transforms into being. Silence is not the conclusion of inquiry, but its culmination, where the question and the answer dissolve into the same wordless recognition. This is the truth that cannot be studied because it was never apart from the one who seeks to study it. It cannot be dissected because it is the substance of the observer. The microscope, the equation, the prayer, all are expressions of the same longing for reunion. Silence fulfills that longing, not by providing explanations, but by dissolving the need for them. In the end, every sound is a ripple on the surface of this silence, every thought a brief echo of the infinite stillness that sustains reality. To experience it is to awaken to the fact that consciousness is not in search of truth. Consciousness is truth exploring itself through the temporary illusion of questions. And in the instant that silence is heard, truly heard, the search ends, not in emptiness, but in the fullness of knowing that everything has always been this: awareness resting as itself, unspoken, unstudied, and perfectly whole. The journey does not end with understanding, it begins with awakening. Beyond thought and form, consciousness stands as the silent origin of all things, the unseen architect shaping reality through awareness itself. Science may describe the patterns, but only consciousness feels their meaning. To see beyond is not to escape the world, but to perceive it as it truly is, a living mirror reflecting the infinite intelligence from which it was born. In that recognition, separation dissolves and truth ceases to be theory. It becomes presence. If you reach this point, write in the comments, "I see beyond." That single phrase will tell me you felt the silence behind these words. And if this vision resonated with you, subscribe and stay close. There is more truth waiting to be unveiled.